The challenge is just it's a high profile event in a country with a lot of ways to harm people.
This is America's Cup, how the world's favorite sporting event will meet America's own vision for it. Well, a very warm welcome to America's Cup and the very first podcast iteration of it. Since June of this year, America's Cup has been a Substack newsletter where I've been considering how the world's most beloved sport and the world's most beloved event, essentially in the World Cup, will meet America's vision for it in 2026. Today, on the first iteration of the podcast, I will be talking to a former member of Barack Obama's Homeland Security team about security at the World Cup. But first, just a little bit more about this newsletter and this podcast. I'm sort of considering the intersection between what the world has come to expect from this beloved tournament and how this unique moment in US politics, culture, and society might shape the 2026 iteration of the World Cup. If you do get a chance, please do take a look at my Substack newsletter and consider subscribing. It's Talib Visram, that's my name, talibvisram.substack.com/subscribe. I've considered, just to give you kind of a rundown of what we've covered so far, I've been looking at some of the extreme travel burdens in the most geographically expansive World Cup ever. I've explained why this is the most carbon-intensive World Cup, looked at travel bans and visa wait times, looked at the possibility of ICE agents on site, looked at some of the historical parallels, for example, to the 1934 World Cup, when Italy was mired in fascism, essentially. That was, of course, Mussolini's World Cup. I've talked to economists about the dynamic pricing or variable pricing system that FIFA is going to adopt for the first time this year. I've talked to economists about whether this World Cup will be profitable. And the answer may surprise you because it's different from what it usually is. I've also interviewed a former US World Cup player who played in 1994, the last time that America hosted. I have a snippet of an interview I did with Eva Longoria. The longer story is about her investment with the Mexican soccer team Necaxa, and that was published on therap.com. But I've published a snippet where she talks a little bit about, as a new Mexican resident, her vision of this joint World Cup between the US, Canada, and Mexico. I've talked about the state of youth soccer, and I've talked with some of the host city directors actually putting on the event, including an extensive Q&A with the Philadelphia host city director, who has been incredibly helpful. But there's so much more to talk about. I intend to talk to fans planning their pilgrimages or boycotts. I want to look at how protests and flag waving might be handled. I want to talk to airlines and hotels and Airbnb hosts and people trying to rent out their homes to fans. People applying to be volunteers and ambassadors to welcome foreign fans. Small businesses and vendors that are trying to get involved in the action. Some of the best food mashups that we might see. So it's not going to be all doom and gloom. And then plans for America's 250th birthday, which will coincide next July 4th with a knockout match. So really, this is not about the football. It's not about the horse race of the results, although there will be enough for the football fans for sure. This is more about the planning and the logistics and the lead up. My background is I'm a freelance reporter. I spent many years reporting on the social and environmental impact of business. And separately, I'm just a huge World Cup fan. Going back to the first one I can remember, which was France 98 and original Ronaldo and all that good stuff. Obviously, there are many issues that need ironing out and a lot of uncertainty. So trying to get to the bottom of some of that stuff with this project. For this first podcast episode, I felt like we couldn't look past the big news item that's been going around over the past couple of weeks, and that is the shooting of Charlie Kirk. One of the things I noticed after that happened was that there was so many tweets just scrolling social media that wondered, how is the US holding this thing? I mean, this obviously is not a sole incident. The US has a history of gun violence. It's something I've reported on extensively. I've been down to the National School Safety Conference in Orlando, and I've been to a military Disneyland in Kentucky where they teach kids how to shoot AR-15 juniors. I reported on gun suicides in Wyoming. This is something that existed long before this news cycle. And by the way, there was a mass shooting on the very same day that Charlie Kirk was shot. Just to throw up some stats to make this clearer, in 2025, there have been 361 mass shootings in the US. Since the 1st of January 2013, middle of Obama's administration, there have been 6,893 mass shootings. But we're not even just talking about gun violence. We're talking about the current state of geopolitics in America. America is famously not friends with everyone on earth, including a lot of teams that have qualified for the World Cup. So the disbelief from a lot of people, especially I think foreigners who are not used to this level of gun violence, and we shouldn't be used to this level of gun violence. We shouldn't be so desensitized to it. I'm just going to read a couple of the tweets that I came across right after the Charlie Kirk shooting, which really exposed how vulnerable even kind of high-profile figures are in public. So at United Trey, I suppose Manchester United fan, good man, said, imagine going to a football game with the fear of being shot at any moment. The 2026 World Cup cannot, in caps, be hosted in America, man. Another tweet came from Certified Quanga Boy, and he says, the World Cup is being played in that country. And 4 laugh my ass off emojis. At CFC_Janty, Chelsea fan. Okay, we can deal with that. It says, I'm sorry, but the World Cup can never be hosted in America. What the actual fuck? And at Stu Holden, who's a soccer media personality, goes, yeehaw, next year is going to be a zoo. Yeah, I mean, all of these sentiments are very, very valid. We have to do upfront security in order to keep people safe so that we feel safe. But it's also striking a balance with how much militarization of enforcement is going to make us feel even less safe. And the kind of militarization of police and law enforcement in the States is not something that a lot of people in Europe, for example, are going to be used to. I was very fortunate to be invited to a Club World Cup game in June with the Philadelphia organizing committee for the World Cup. It was the Real Madrid game, by the way, Real Madrid versus Salzburg, 3-0 Madrid, and it poured down with rain the entire time. But great experience. I got the opportunity to meet Michael Del Bene, who's the executive director of the Philadelphia FIFA Fan Festival. So each city is going to have their own fan fests. So people who are not going to the game, but just want to kind of hang out in the park or in a big outdoor space with big screens and fellow fans, that's just part of the World Cup spirit. So I got to tour Lemon Hill Park, which is going to be the space for the Philadelphia tournament. And I'll have a post coming up on that, on how to build a fan fest. Michael was very generous with his time. But one of the things that I asked about toward the end of our interview was security and how you balance security with fans feeling like they're at a joyous event. And this is one of the things that he said.
By the time you get there, you will have had to show your ticket 3 times. You will have to walk by 100 police officers, bomb sniffing dogs, bag checks, magnetometers. It's all going to happen very casually. You may not even in many cases know that it's happening, but you are getting analyzed from the minute you get within about 1,000 feet of this place. You are getting watched, you are getting evaluated, you're getting looked at. And so what we do is you do all the security up front. So that way, when people come in, they've done it. And now they're free to enjoy themselves, you know?
I suppose that didn't make me feel great in terms of how hardline the security will be, whether there are chances for profiling, since tech is going to be involved, possibly AI, drones. How is some of this tech going to be able to tell the difference between, for example, someone who's drunk a little bit too much and just kind of having a bit too much fun and someone who's a real threat? I wondered what the implications were for privacy, data privacy, for example. So this balance in security is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And since the Kirk shooting, something I wanted to revisit. So I got in touch with Juliette Kayyem, who you may have seen, she's featured quite a lot on national TV, particularly on CNN. And most notably, she was Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security under the Obama administration. She's still heavily involved in security consultancy and obviously just an expert in this space. So I wanted to run by some of these concerns with her. So here's my conversation with Juliette Kayyem. Is it safe for the U.S. to hold a mega event like this generally and at the current moment?
Yeah. So honestly, like no one in my space of mega event planning does safe. We do safer. These are big events. And whether you had the geopolitics of our times or, gun violence, America is still holding events, the Super Bowl, concerts, whatever else. But FIFA is going to present unique challenges. So one is just simply the distributed nature of the events over 3 countries and several months. It's hard to keep up an optimal safety presence in all those instances. So that's the first, is just simply, it's not even an Olympics. Olympics, I have opening and closing. Here I have opening, then I got lots of stuff going, I've got closing. The big security focus will obviously be on New York at the end of it. And New York knows how to do this. I think foreign visitors, international visitors might be a little surprised at that posture, which will include federal, state, and local assets. So that's like the one piece. And I do think you're right that the Charlie Kirk assassination is probably going to make focusing on snipers and potential rooftop vulnerabilities at these stadiums much more likely. Drone surveillance, things like that, just making sure there's no movement on the top. But I mean, again, FIFA is a lot like an Olympics. It's not just the events. Every city is going to have events around each game and stuff. So each of those is going to be challenged.
Yeah, so many big things to think about. In terms of security, though, security for mega events, how do you kind of even go about starting to think about a security strategy, especially one with an event that's so kind of decentralized? I mean, is it going to come down to local enforcement?
There's no FIFA game plan. Basically how it's going to work, and I know this because I've been involved, is FIFA has a very, very sophisticated group working safety, former FBI agents, people whose names are known in our field. So that's the good news. But this is like a franchise. Each city in bidding had made assurances about safety that local law enforcement would be in charge. So it really is no different than a Red Sox game in that sense, right? The threats will be different, the profile will be greater, but there's a date and there's a game, and the Boston Police Department will manage the large chunk of safety and security. The state comes in to support, the federal government will come in particular to support with high technology and stuff. But there isn't like a FIFA security apparatus in terms of operations. What FIFA is doing is it's working with those entities to ensure that there's like baseline safety and security. Those teams are working with each of the cities and host facilities, but also recommending technology or other things that would be helpful. So in the world I live in, FIFA seems very sophisticated. This is looking like an Olympics. The challenge is just, it's a high profile event in a country with a lot of ways to harm people.
Right. And a lot of participation, I suppose, from nations that the U.S. is not particularly friends with.
Yeah, I think FIFA, obviously, given the relationship between the head of FIFA and the president, is just going to ignore that. It's like all of the crap they're just going to ignore. This thing is happening. Any speculation otherwise is, I think, a joke. Where I think it's going to be interesting or twofold. One is whether our travel ban, which is impacting lots of spectators who might come here, will be reassessed in time. I doubt that because I don't think that market is so big for FIFA. As you morph from FIFA to the Olympics in LA, that's where I think the IOC is going to have greater focus. But right now, FIFA is hand in hand with the White House of this thing is going to happen, and just ignore the criticisms, the international travel, all that stuff. And we are just plowing forward.
You know, one thing I've been thinking a lot about is how you balance. The World Cup is really all about getting big crowds together. It's not just the games. There's going to be fan fests in each of the cities and elsewhere. There's going to be big crowds everywhere. And that's part of the fun, right? This revelry, this drinking pints together and celebrating with people from different places. How do you balance that with security, essentially, and making sure that Europeans and people who are not from here and not used to American-style militarized security are actually going to have fun and not be scared?
It's a great question. And obviously part of it is going to depend on how the White House wants this to go, right? One of the reasons why I think FIFA moved into Trump Towers is for their offices for this World Cup is to placate a governance style that is very emotion driven. So if Trump one day wants to wake up and say, this thing is ridiculous, why are we having it? You know, who knows, right? So part of it is going to be what kind of imprint and footprint will the federal government want on this? And you'll remember not a very funny joke from J.D. Vance, who said, we want people to come for the World Cup, but just leave because then Secretary Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, will go after you. That was shot down. This is not the welcoming that the U.S. wants. So I do think that this political beast is so invested in this that a lot of the concerns that people have probably won't be realized. But because also in defense of my people, which is people who do mega event security planning, we know that. We know that to secure a nuclear facility is different than an event, right? And a fun event. Safety is friction. And the more friction you have, the less fun it is. Look at the US Open when Trump decided to show up for the last game. If you look at those pictures, that was an organization not ready to handle friction, and people were pissed off. So there's all sorts of technology, ticketing, apps, biometrics, drones that are making the experience of mega event safety better, I think more safe and with more flow. And yes, the safety apparatus could get harsher on that, especially if there's an incident or the threat environment changes. And that's what will be monitored. But each city is going to be different too. Any rational person knows in safety, you're looking at New York. You're just looking at New York right now. And there could be a new mayor, a mayor who has already decided to take on FIFA. So this will be very dynamic. I hope, I hope people come. I really am a big critic of the immigration enforcement at all costs attitude and think it's horrible for this nation and hope one day it can change. One of the reasons why someone like me, who's ensconced in horror and hell and all sorts of bad things, really does like the sports and a mega event world is there's a goodness to it that, or I know it's corrupt too, but there's a hope to it that is really special.
Totally, yeah. And kind of the multiculturalism and everything that goes around it is great. I did meet one of the folks who's putting on one of the fan festivals, and I just want to read you one of the things he said to me, because it just kind of struck me as this balance between security and fear a little bit. He said that you may not even know it's happening, but you're getting analyzed from the minute you get within 1,000 feet of this place. You're getting watched, you're getting evaluated, you're getting looked at. Okay, nice to know that it's secure, but that doesn't necessarily make me feel good, especially as like a brown person. There's going to be different people from different places and wondering whether they're getting profiled, essentially.
It starts before that. When you buy your ticket, it starts. We don't know everyone who has a ticket and stuff, but people who are making themselves identifiable to FIFA, whatever. So here's what people should think about. It's going to feel more like airplane security, but the experience is going to be what you want. right? In other words, it's going to be, oh my God, so much surveillance and whatever, and fears of profiling. Although I think those fears are greater at the border than they will be in the experience. I mean, come on, it's in New York. Like, there's lots of brown people in New York. Oklahoma is not holding one of the World Cups. So they're all in major cities. So I think people mentally should view it as it's like I'm getting on an airplane in the United States. There is an anticipation that there's lots of things going on I haven't seen, but the industry and government are aligned in that they want you on the other side. So it's going to be different than I'm doing a bike ride in the park or whatever, but it's going to feel more familiar. And that person that's quoted that's exactly like airline security. It's starting at the moment of your interest. 99% of the people are going to be good faith ticket holders, 99.98. There's lots of crap that happens that goes outside of terrorism or whatever. And I think your biggest threat is not something happens in the stadium. It's going to be, as you said, like at the events outside the stadium, cars, vehicular traffic, things like that.
What are the kind of new technologies that may be used? You mentioned drones, things like that. What about AI?
Most metal detectors and most metal detection in terms of crowd flow are using AI and biometric information to determine, am I carrying a long gun? It's not going to get everything. So you've seen that at the Olympics, various companies. I'm involved with one of the companies, so I won't say its name, but there's competitors. So most of the flow at mega events has changed. You're going to have apps that are used as a way not only to give you information, but they're tracking you. You should know that. And they may not even ask your permission. I mean, I don't know what the level is. Drones are going to do aerial surveillance, blockages in crowd. Because remember, we could have safety incidents that aren't related to outside influences. You could have crowd crushes, things like that, as well as monitoring biological or any chemical distribution. And I think the roads will be closed. I think any rational person at this stage will say we can't have cars close to these areas. Bags will be limited, I suspect, at almost all of the stadiums. And then you're going to have not uniformed police. You're going to have surveillance within the stadium. You're going to have surveillance throughout the stadium. It's a lot. But the point of it is the experience won't feel so unfamiliar if you get the airplane mentality. I'm boarding an airplane because I want to go somewhere. And this is the sort of price of entry.
One thing is, with the current political situation, what's the likelihood that, cities will have ICE present and National Guard present?
I think it's high. It's hard to know 6 or 7 months from now, but their incentive structure, if Trump can check it, will be different for those weeks. We cannot afford, for a variety of reasons, and also because of the Olympics, to have a massive raid of tourists.
We've talked a lot about, I suppose, prevention. If the worst case scenario would happen, whatever it is, what's the response?
Response will be local, state, and federal as well in terms of event management. All of those are built into planning, everything from family unification to surging ambulances. The good thing is that none of these stadiums was built for the moment. All of them have planning apparatuses, ways to communicate. So like download the app for a variety of reasons and then go through that drilling. And New York will probably just 4X their planning, I think, because that would be the focus.
That was my conversation with Juliette Kayyem. My thanks to her. This is something I'll revisit in this newsletter and podcast for sure. But at the moment, like most things, there are unanswered questions, things that will have to be ironed out, things we won't know until this thing happens. So look forward to that being the conclusion of many of these podcasts. But thank you so much for tuning in if you've made it this far. Again, please consider visiting and subscribing to my Substack, talibvisram.substack.com/subscribe. If you're following on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, please consider leaving a review and a rating, only if it's nice. And please let me know if you have suggestions for other topics to cover. You should be able to leave comments on the podcast on the Substack newsletter. And that's it for this edition.